Good morning, Beacon Church, and thanks for joining us online. We're so excited about the things that we have going on over the next couple of months during the holiday season. We can't believe it's already November, and Thanksgiving is a short few weeks away. That being said, we want to find ways to love and to serve our community during this time. We want to continue to encourage you to be praying about specific ways that you can love your neighbors and your friends and families during this time. But we also want to give you an opportunity to partner with us in what we are doing for Thanksgiving in our community this year. We are partnering with some local organizations to donate items to provide a Thanksgiving meal to families here in our community. We'll be sharing a specific list with you and posting it online soon, so be on the lookout and keep up with us online to see that. We also want to encourage you to be a part of our Beacon community throughout the week. If you haven't already, consider joining a home group. I would love to help you find the group that is the best fit for you, so just go to our website and fill out the form on the groups page. We're excited that we have access to Right Now Media, where we have a ton of curriculum and Bible studies right at our fingertips to help lead us in discussions that are in these groups. We're excited to announce also that Right Now Media will be accessible to everybody. Scan the QR code that's on the screen to pull it up. Whether you are looking for some individual studies or want some ideas for your group, Right Now Media is a great resource for Christian studies and conversation. Thanks for joining us online. We hope that you will have a blessed week.
Well, good morning. It's great to see you guys. Can you believe that it's already November? Thanksgiving is a couple of weeks away. It's crazy. But I love that the weather is still beautiful outside. It is a beautiful day today. I hope you get to enjoy that. But as maybe you've experienced, November is filled with different challenges, right? A lot of people have these gratitude challenges. You ever done this? I got here right now a little grateful jar. Anybody ever had one of those before where you write down little things that you're grateful for every day, and then at the end of the month you open it up and you see and remember the good things? And so I wanted to start off today. I've written down some things that I'm grateful for, and so I'm going to share a couple of those with you. Oh, I love this one. The first thing that I'm grateful for today is my loving wife, Tara. I'm so blessed, so fortunate to have such an amazing wife, and I love her. That's the first thing that I'm grateful for today. And let's see what we got, number two. Number two. Oh, this one's good. I'm thankful that I have a full-time job and that it's with you guys, and I get to be here at Beacon Church. It's amazing to think about, like, pre-COVID, when God put it on our hearts to say, I'm going to have you go start a new church. And we were like, okay, we'll do it. And then COVID hit and all this stuff and craziness. And I'm just thankful. I'm grateful for just that I get to be here every week with you guys. Number three. What am I grateful for? Number three. Oh, this one is really close to my heart. Very sentimental one. I am very grateful for Cadbury's chocolate. Came to America and you guys try to indoctrinate me with this Hershey's stuff. Ain't working. Cadbury's is the best. Anybody like those little mini eggs at Easter, the Cadbury? Oh. A round of applause. That's how you know it's good right there. All right, number four that I am grateful for. Good friends. I love that I have friends that I just get to do things with, that I know that if I'm in need, they'll help me out, that I get to connect with. I'm grateful for my friends today. And there we go. Number five. Oh, this one is one of my favorites. Oh, man. I recently, I'm sitting at my house, and I have this dog, and her name's Molly. And Molly loves people. She's a black lab mix, and I'm sitting there, and we have these buzzwords that if you say them, she gets excited. So she could be dead sleep, and I just say, you want to go for a drive? And she jumps right up, tail wagging, runs to the door, and is like, let's go. Where are we going? And the reason why is, it is an amazing experience when I get to drive with my dog, because I have a sunroof, and she does this. Check out the screens. Oh, yeah. Driving around town, and she just has her paws on the sunroof, head out the sunroof, ears going everywhere, loving life. Now, really what I'm grateful for in that moment is the fact that people will be walking on the street or driving past, and a kid would just be like, "Oh, Mom, look," and you just see these big smiles on their faces. And I love that my dog not only makes my wife and I smile, but she gets to make the whole town as we drive past people smile. And I'm not one of those weird dog people. I didn't grow up with dogs. I didn't want a dog. Maybe you've been there, but then I got married, and so we have a dog. But if I was, I don't know, 10 years ago sitting in the audience, I'm like, oh, really? A dog? Come on. Oh, man, it's so good. Those moments I'm just grateful for. I'm grateful for the weather. I'm grateful for so many things in my life that I just get to experience and be reminded of the goodness of who God is. So what are you grateful for today? Right now in your life, do you have things that you can just say, I am grateful for this? What is it? Maybe you've recently started, because we're in November 7th, so you got a jar filled with 7 different things that you're grateful for. I'd invite you to take time today, this week, to ask yourselves, what am I grateful for? We'll hear about the impact that has, but if nothing else, being grateful is good for the soul. It's good to be reminded that despite the circumstances, we have a God that loves us and a God that gives us things that we can be grateful for. But we're in this constant tension between these two things, between being grateful and celebrating, and then the second one is complaining. We're in this tension between these two things. We have these choices every day, these opportunities to celebrate, but we also have these opportunities to complain. Now, if you have someone that leans more towards the complaining side that you connect with in your life, like you know the difference really well between complaining and celebrating. There's some people that just seems like they were born to complain. You met any of those people? Like no matter what happens in their life, it seems like, man, they must have a tough life, because I've never heard them celebrate anything. Last month, we just had a season where a lot of bills came all at once. You ever had that? Where like grown-up life, and you're like, when I was a kid, $10 meant so much. It doesn't mean much anymore. But we had one of those months where it's just like bills on bills on bills, and we were able to pay them, and so it was fine. But it was also my birthday month, and for some reason, we registered both our cars under my birthday. And so when it hits, you get the registration bills, right? And then when you register them, then you got to get them inspected. Now, my wife has a newer car, but my car, we pay cash for, and it runs. So I love it. But I always have that moment where you drop it off for inspection, and I went to breakfast with one of my friends, and I'm sitting at breakfast, and I'm just in my head saying, all right, God, please, just come on. Please just make no issues with the car this time. And you're sitting there, you're waiting, and thankfully I was with a good friend, and we had breakfast, and it was just a great time. And then I get that call. I'm like, hey, excuse me for a second. So I take the call, and the guy goes, you're all set. Okay. So what's wrong? What do I need to pay for? And he was like, oh, nothing. Everything's all good. If you want a rotation, we rotate them, $20. Yes! I celebrated. I just said, all right, I prayed for it, and today I'm just going to thank Jesus. It was just one of those moments where I was just so thankful. Thankful that Jesus answered my prayer in that moment. We have these opportunities, right? And celebrating sometimes feels like, yeah, but my life is filled with stuff that if you knew what was going on, like, how do you celebrate in those moments? And there's seasons, right? I get it. There's seasons where it feels really difficult to celebrate, to find even just one thing that we're grateful for. And my heart breaks for people when they're in those seasons, but I would just love to invite you to go with me today if you're in one of those seasons and just hear the opportunity that maybe we can have despite what's going on. Maybe the opportunity that we can have despite those circumstances. The other thing that I've realized is sometimes it can feel like we deserve to complain about stuff. Sometimes things happen and it's like, you know what? This just stunk. Maybe you felt like this kid in this video. Check this out.
And Mama and me and Wolf.
She didn't give you a kiss?
And Wolf.
And she just went to work?
Yeah.
What kind of mama does that? You don't know? Me neither.
Hi, and Nana Mama. Hi, baby Nana, Dada, me, and Wolf, and me, and Jay.
You wanted to give her a kiss?
And did you play?
And she just went to work?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Oh, man.
All right, you can cut that there. I mean, come on. The kid wanted a kiss. If there's ever a time to complain, surely that was it, right? Well, Paul, we're going to be in Philippians chapter 2 today, and he's talking all about what it means to celebrate and to complain, the opportunities that we have. And so it goes like this in Philippians chapter 2, verse 14. It says, do everything without grumbling or arguing. Could probably stop there, right? I'll go on, though. Verse 15, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. Then you'll shine among them like stars in the sky as you hold firmly to the word of life. And then I will be able to boast on the day of Christ that I did not run or labor in vain. Wow. We're starting a new series today called Shine Bright. And we're entering into the holiday season. And in the holiday season, we get an opportunity to either celebrate what the holidays really mean, Thanksgiving, Christmas, or complain about all the other things that come along with the holidays, right? The family members who, if they show up, there's going to be drama. The money that you have to spend, because apparently you got to spend thousands of dollars on Christmas presents every year. The time, the work, the issues, everything that comes along with the holidays. And so in this series, we're inviting us to talk about what does it look like to shine brightly for Jesus this holiday season. Where we can know that we don't have to have issues, but we can live in joy through Thanksgiving and Christmas. When was the last time, maybe for you, that you had a celebration as Thanksgiving and Christmas? Maybe you have a family where you're like, no, we actually love each other, and things go great, and the holidays are perfect, and it's a great time. And I think those are more rare than common. But what would it look like if we lived gratefully and we're able to shine bright this holiday season? So we have a memory verse, as we do with every series. And so I thought, what better than to use Philippians 2:14 as our memory verse, so that whenever the opportunities arise to celebrate or complain, you can be like, oh, I have a memory verse that tells me what to do in this moment. So let's read it out loud. It's on the screens together. It's going to be on the screens. Philippians 2:14. Let's read it together. Do everything without grumbling or arguing. Wow. When you get that opportunity, when your kids are just acting up, just remind yourself of that verse. Or when your spouse is just bugging you because you haven't done what you were supposed to do, remind yourself of that verse. Or when you're struggling to get the dinner ready and people are arriving and you're like, okay, but we said 2 o'clock. Why does that mean you get here at 1:30? Just remember. If you need to, I got some really helpful ways with this. Just put a little card in your pocket, write the verse on it, and just when they show up, say, hold on 1 second. Okay. Hey, it's great to see you. And when they ask to see the card, just say, don't worry about it. We've got this opportunity, this tension in life that we live in a world that really likes to complain, and yet we have this opportunity to celebrate. And so as we start this series, this first message is going to all come together with this idea where you're invited to live gratefully. Invited to live gratefully so that you can shine brightly. We have this real-life example with the holidays to really put this to test. And there's so many things that you can really complain about, so many people, so many, even just life. Have you ever had that moment where you just want to complain about your life? You're just done. And nobody really cares or is listening, but you just say it out loud, whether it's online or out loud to your friends. You just get to that moment. Sometimes it may be with God, and you just ask, why? Why, God? And you just want to complain, and you feel like you have a right to complain in that moment. And maybe other people look at you and say, yeah, you do. But I want to discover today what it looks like to really look at what Paul is inviting us into with celebrating in those moments. Because it's a choice. It's a choice to celebrate. When was the last time that you celebrated something? Anybody a big celebration person? Like when you throw a party, you don't just get the Amazon version of balloons. You go to the store and you get the expensive big ones filled with helium, and you're ready to go for the party. Any big party throwers in the room? Nope. Okay. Celebrations. When was the last time you celebrated something? Maybe it starts small, right? Maybe it's something like when you have the opportunity to complain or celebrate because you go to your kid's sink and there's toothpaste all over the sink. You ever had that? And you're like, well, in that moment, you can complain or just celebrate the fact they brushed their teeth that day. Staying with the bathroom theme right here. There's a certain way that toilet paper should be put on the toilet paper holder, right? Like, I've heard it said that it should be a beard, not a mullet. Go with me on this. You seen that meme? Where a mullet, it's going from behind and you pull it down like that. Where a beard, it goes on front the right way, where you pull it down and it's all working correctly. And so in those moments when you're looking at that and you're like, who would do that? You can complain, or you can just celebrate that in your time of need, you had toilet paper on the toilet paper holder. I don't know, you decide. Well, gratefulness, it has this correlation with joy. We don't live a joy-filled life and that leads to being grateful. Gratefulness comes before joy. The people that are filled with lives where they're living gratefully, it leads to them being filled with joy. And sometimes we can get it backwards where it's like, well, when everything's going right, when I feel joyful, when things are good, then I'll be grateful for the good things that happened in my life. Okay. What if we switched it and said, no, I'm going to choose to take a step and celebrate instead of complain and live gratefully and see the impacts that it has with the joy that it brings. I'd invite you to seek that out. But it's a choice, and we see this, there's an example of this in Luke chapter 17, where Jesus encounters these people, and he does this life-changing thing, and we'll see what happens. Luke 17, verse 11. Now on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. As he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance and called out in a loud voice, Jesus, Master, have pity on us. When he saw them, he said, go show yourselves to the priests. And as they went, they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back, praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and and thanked him. And he was a Samaritan. Jesus asked, were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner? Then he said to him, rise and go. Your faith has made you well. In this story, these people have leprosy. If you're not familiar with leprosy, it's a very contagious, very life-changing disease. And in that time, they had people who had leprosy would have to live outside of the town. They weren't allowed to associate. They weren't allowed to go around people. That's why they stood at a distance. Their lives were impacted in such a way that Jesus, he spoke this healing over them, and they were completely transformed. Now, I can't help but correlate that to our lives, to my own lives, with the fact that before I became a Christian, I had no assurances, no hope, anything outside of Jesus, and now he's completely transformed my life. And yet, in this story, isn't it so interesting? One person came back to thank him. Isn't that the world we live in today? Where it feels like you do something nice for someone, you go out of your way to love on someone, and how often do they really come and thank you? Now, I know that's not what it's about for us. That's not why we do good things and nice things to get the praise and the thankfulness. But it would be nice occasionally, right? And then I think about this, where these people came and they were healed, and only one of them came and fell at Jesus' feet and worshipped and thanked him. I wonder, what would it look like if we decided to celebrate in those moments when Jesus provided? When was the last time you celebrated at God's goodness and what he did in your life? When was the last time you even really thought about the good things that God has done in your life? I find that it's easier for me to complain than celebrate these days. I don't know if that's just you get to a certain age and like the weight of life hits you more. Like you're not a kid anymore. When you're a kid, like, okay, you just go to bed, you wake up next day, everything's good. Parents did your laundry? Well, depending on your kid. Things just got better, right? But as an adult, it feels like, it's still there. The issue's still there. The people that I have issues with are still there. How do I navigate that? How do I do that? It gets harder to celebrate. But what I know is when people do things, when people are investing in me, when they do stuff that really makes a difference in my life, I need to make sure that I have expression of that gratitude towards them. Because I think that unexpressed gratitude leads to issues. When was the last time you really thanked people for what they've done for you? When was the last time you celebrated? Because if to shine brightly, we need to live with that mindset of gratefulness. I have a friend who every Tuesday, he calls it Gratty Tuesday. And he posts something online. Some of you guys know him. And he just says, this is what I'm thankful for this week. And it's great that he does that, but the even better thing for me is the triggers that it has on other people's lives. Because then people just start commenting. And then people start sharing and they start saying things. And it's contagious because when you celebrate, it's contagious. People celebrate with you. But the problem is when you complain, it happens too, right? There's certain people that you know if you're going to see them, you got to really prepare yourselves. Because no matter what's happening in their life, it always seems like they're complaining. And if you don't have those friends, I'm sorry, that might be you. We have these tension between complaining and celebrating. And I think that in order to live gratefully, there's three things that I want to invite us into. The first one is this: celebrate things often. It's one thing to have a birthday party once a year, to celebrate certain things once a year. But I think that we're missing something if we don't celebrate on a daily basis. Now, I know you probably don't feel like celebrating all the time. But there was a study done and published in the Journals of Social, Cognitive, and Affective Neuroscience. Say that quickly. What they did was they took these people and they did MRIs on them. And when they did those MRIs, they invited them to say things to themselves that were affirming, so self-affirmations. And what they found through the MRI was when people give themselves these self-affirmations, in their body is released the same chemicals, the same feeling as when you eat pleasurable, when you experience pleasure with eating food, with getting good results, with things like that. So what they said was that there's a positive reaction in people's lives when they say self-affirming things. That's interesting, right? Like that's scientifically proven. And I think if that's true for us, what would be the impact of us saying it to other people in addition to that? Do you have memories of teachers that spoke truth and affirming things when you were a kid? Like some people have it, they know where they were sitting when a certain teacher told them something that they changed their life forever. And they went into this certain trade, this certain field, this certain thing, and they loved it and they remember it. Maybe you had a parent who did that with you. My dad growing up, that whenever we would bring a test home, he would ask me and say, "Did you try your hardest?" And if I said yes, it didn't matter the grade, he would celebrate and say, "Great job." I loved that. It sticks with me. People need to celebrate things often. So again, what was the last thing that you celebrated? Was it this week? Was it today? Or are you having a hard time remembering what it was and when it was? We need to celebrate things often. Celebrate your kids. Even the little things. It can start with the little things. Celebrate when your kids clean up after themselves. You didn't even have to ask. Celebrate when they clean up when you do ask. Celebrate that they are being loving to their brothers, their sisters. Celebrate things because our world is warped and crooked, and there's all these opportunities where people complain and they say mean things to people, and it's tough being a kid these days going to school. So celebrate them. Now again, I'm not saying that you celebrate them even when they're doing bad things. I'm saying that you address the issue appropriately, but don't forget to celebrate. Just because they do one thing wrong doesn't mean you can't celebrate things they do right. And it doesn't have to start with kids. Imagine this. Imagine if you celebrated your spouse and not just on your anniversary. Like imagine if every day you woke up and you truly meant this. You looked them in the eyes and you said, "I love you. Thank you so much for doing this, for being this, for loving me, for all these different things." Can you imagine the impact it would have on your relationship? Celebrate things often. And I guess it doesn't have to stop with our family, right? What would it look like if you did it with your neighbors, your coworkers, your boss? Now, it gets a little weird sometimes because if you go and celebrate someone, they're like, "Okay, what do you want?" You just say nothing. Just want to let you know X, Y, Z. To know that I appreciate you. To know that when you did this, when you're specific about it too, it really hits home for people. Celebrate things often. Now, Paul, he knows the reality of where we live. He's not saying like, okay, just ignore all the issues. Because in verse 15 he says, "So that you may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation." The reality is he knows the same thing that was happening back then, the bad things, the world that we live in, it hasn't changed. Sin still has an impact in our world today. People still do things that hurt us, that say mean things. People still do things where they're trying to undercut us, where they're trying to destroy us. They still do things like that. We do things like that. Paul gets that, but what he's saying is what he says in Philippians 4:11. I'm not saying this because I'm in need, for I've learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. There's this elevation with contentment over entitlement. Now, entitlement is a really buzzword these days, right? Oh, that younger generation, they're so entitled. They don't want to work. Maybe. But I think let's explore a little more with that idea of contentment versus entitlement. Because Paul has something really special to say on that. But when we encounter people, there often becomes this recurring trait, this problem, that it's hard to celebrate when you feel like someone owes you something. There's certain people that live this way, right? They always feel like the world owes them something. You ever met someone like that? Like, no matter what happens, there's always an issue. They're always complaining. Like, even when they get what they desire. Their goal is to do X, Y, Z. They get it. Finally, they get it. And what happens? Why'd I have to wait so long? Why did I have to ask? Oh, it's like you said, I wanted this, you got this, and now you're still complaining. Because they lean towards complaining rather than celebrating. It's so tricky. And when that happens, it's like they can never shake it. And maybe something happened to them a long time ago that they're still living under the weight of that. Maybe you've had that, where it feels like I can't celebrate because of this. Well, I just want to invite you to release that today. And we'll talk about what that means in a second. But the issue becomes much more about what's going on in your heart than it does about the circumstance. Because when Paul is talking about contentment, what he's saying is no matter what's going on in your life, and remember what Paul went through? Let's list them out. So Paul was constantly persecuted. He got stoned a bunch of times, like big stones are thrown at you by multiple people so that you die. He didn't die. He got shipwrecked. He got put in prison. All these things happened. Can you imagine this guy, Paul, went through all of that, and he's the one saying, it's about contentment. Really? If anybody could complain, in my view, it'd be someone who'd gone through things like that. Like, you could probably give him a pass, right? Oh, man, that's a rough life. But the reality is there is no passes. Paul's saying that it's not about being entitled where I deserve, therefore I demand. And we all encounter this because we say things like, well, I was here first. I worked hard. That's not fair. Why did they get that when I did the same thing and I don't get that promotion? Like, I paid money for this. I deserve this. I demand that you give me what I'm owed. I thought about this week, where sometimes when you go to a store or a restaurant, you get the wrong check, or you get items on the bill that you didn't buy or purchase, right? Anybody ever had that before? Now, most of us would make sure that the wrong gets right. We would take it back and say, hey, I didn't actually buy that meal. I didn't actually buy that item. And they would give you a refund. You agree that you'd probably go ahead and do that? You won't just leave and be like, oh, don't worry about it. Most of us are like that. But if you flip it in reverse, have you ever had a check where they missed an item on it? Where they didn't charge you for the meal, one of the meals that you brought? How many of us go back and right that wrong immediately? Maybe some of us. Others of us are like, no. The reality is, our culture, our inner being tells us that if I deserve something, I should make sure I get what I'm deserved. Demand my pound of flesh. But the reality is, what Paul's saying is, let it go. It's okay. We need to celebrate rather than complain. There's things in our lives that will happen like that. And Paul, he is saying contentment is really what matters. But when we live a certain way, when we shine brightly that way, it's like I mentioned, it's uncommon, it's not normal. People, they kind of look at you weirdly and they're like, why are you doing this? Why are you being so generous? Why are you letting things go? Yet that person did this to you. Are you not going to go talk to them? No. Well, why? And it can be odd and people can look at you weirdly, but what it does is it gives you an opportunity to share the answer to that why. And I love this because I always talk about my goal is to turn ordinary conversations into conversations about Jesus. That's one of the best ones that you get. When you get to show someone that, yes, from the worldly speaking, I deserve this, but I'm going to release it. Well, why? Oh, let me tell you. There's this guy, his name's Jesus. You start your conversation however you want. But we get the opportunity to tell people about who Jesus is because that's the reason why we act that way. So in order to live gratefully, we need to celebrate things often. The second one is we need to hold firmly to the word of life. What the word of life is referring to the gospel. And the whole thing about being a Christian is this. We don't deserve what we're given. We live a life that isn't pleasing to God. We don't deserve to be saved. We don't deserve to receive His grace and His mercy. But in that, even though we don't deserve, He looks at us and says, it's still available to you. That's the truth about it. So when things are going on in our lives that don't feel right, that we're like, well, I deserve this, I demand this, we get to say, oh, actually, I don't deserve this. And Jesus gave it to me. We can forgive because we've been forgiven. We can hold firmly to the gospel. The truth is that this world is fleeting. It's a dark and crooked place, but it is not our home. And so when we focus on what really matters, on our eternal home, it's a lot easier to let things go, right? When money isn't the be-all and end-all, it's a lot easier to not demand everything you're owed. And again, I'm not saying that you don't have conversations about things like that you talk to people, and sometimes there is a time to talk to someone about what they owe you. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying that we get this opportunity to release this entitlement mindset, how we get to forgive because we're forgiven. Ephesians 4:32 says, be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other just as Christ, God, forgave you. This is what the gospel is about, right? Forgiveness. Now, you have to ask for forgiveness. You have to repent to receive that mercy and that grace from God. But the truth is that when you do that, it is the only relationship that will never let you down. The relationship with Jesus is the assurance you get, so you hold firmly to the assurance of knowing where you're going, to the purpose of knowing what you're called to do, and to the knowledge that you have a relationship with Jesus. We just had our I Am series recently where we talked all about what it means to know Jesus. If today you're sitting here and you're like, yeah, but there's so many things going on in my life and I can't just release that. Well, I'd invite you to talk about who Jesus is. Because there's nobody that can't come into a relationship with Jesus. If you ask for forgiveness, if you repent, and you can receive that mercy, the free gift that you don't deserve. The punishment that Jesus took so that we could have eternal life, the assurance, and hold firmly to that gospel message, to the word of life. Paul knew what this meant. He knew that he'd been forgiven, and so he was able to go through all of these things and still look to this idea of contentment. I'm sure that he had days where he complained. I'm not saying that. I'm sure he had moments where he was like, really, God, prison again? Come on. But he knew in his heart what it meant to love Jesus. We can live gratefully because of his grace and mercy. God has set out this way for us to live where he calls us to live a certain way because he knows what's best for us. And with that, I think that when it comes to living gratefully, there's a correlation between living gratefully and rest. I know that if I'm tired, it's a lot harder for me to be grateful. It's just the truth. God designed us to take a day off, to rest, the Sabbath. He created us to live a certain way. And I call it the triple threat. If I'm hungry, hot, and tired, don't come find me. Unless you have food and a fan. Like, that's just the reality of it. It's like, I need rest. And God knows that. He designed me to be a certain way. He knows that rest is required. And so we're invited today to live gratefully and to celebrate over complain, to celebrate things often, to hold on to the word of life of who Jesus is, what he's done for us, the gospel message. And in Philippians 4:7 it says, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. When we find that rest in God, it doesn't always make sense, but it comes from him. It transcends our understanding on occasions. And so we can enjoy this peace that only comes from him, where the circumstances may be such, but we know that we have a God that loves us. So the third thing for us to live gratefully is this. We need to shine bright every day. We live in a dark world. There's a lot of mess, right? And so our invitation is this: bring the celebration. Don't bring the complaining. Don't add to the mess. There's sometimes in my life I just can't help myself. I can, but I choose not to. But it's tough, right? Well, like you're bugging someone and you just don't care and you just keep on poking the bear. I don't know why. There's just moments in our lives where we do that and it never goes well. It's always about complaining and grumbling and some kind of issue that we have with that person. But what if we changed the story for today? And we decided, no, I'm going to stop and I'm going to celebrate. The reality is that being in a dark place means it's even more imperative for us to bring the light, to shine brightly. We live in that dark world, so it's even more important for us to do this. Philippians 2:15 says, it's so that we become blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. And then I love this. Then you will shine among them like stars in the sky. It's not an encouragement, it's just a fact, a statement. As Christians, you have this light that comes on through you. The option is to decide how brightly are you going to allow it to be shone. How brightly you're going to allow it to shine so that people see the goodness of who Jesus is. We have a challenge for us today, and we'll get to that in a second. There's 3 ways that we can live gratefully. We can celebrate things often. We can hold firmly to the word of life, to the gospel, who Jesus is, and then we can shine bright every day. And when we do that, we have this opportunity to say it, to show it, and to share it. We have this opportunity to say it. We're all one kind word away from celebrating. I love this picture. You can put this picture up on the screen. This is a picture of how words can impact through the generations. And this holiday season, this is what happens. Where families come together, there's generations, and things have been done a certain way, where when you were a kid, certain things were said to you. And I love this because it breaks that generational trend. And that's the opportunity that you have if your family's like that today. The opportunity to break that generational trend, to say it, to add in those kind words so that you don't perpetuate the issues of our dark and crooked world. So we get to say it. The next thing is we get to show it. When we show people the undeserved gratitude, it just points them to Jesus. When you are generous even to people who are mean to you, when you're grateful, when you celebrate, even when you feel like you don't want to, they don't deserve it, people notice. We get to love them. And then the last one is to share it, because celebrating is contagious. Don't be the person who brings the complaining to the party. When you show up, people are like, oh no, party's over. Don't be that person. We have this opportunity today. So on your chairs, you have these little note cards, little beacon Post-its. I would love today for you just to take an opportunity to write down something you're grateful for. So if nothing else today, you at least made note of one thing that you're grateful for. And at the end, just drop it off in this box if you want. We'd love to see what people are grateful for today. But then you get to take the rest of the Post-it with you. And you get an opportunity, whether it's to write a grateful thing that you're thankful for to someone to give to them, or just a jar that you can put it in for yourself. To spend every day this next month writing down things you're grateful for, because it starts with these small steps. And in Philippians 2, I'm just going to read it one more time because this is what it's about. Do everything without grumbling or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault. Paul knows we live in a warped and crooked generation, but we get to shine among them like stars in the sky, holding firmly to what we believe in the gospel and who Jesus is. And then, just like Paul, Jesus can look at us and he's able to boast in the day of Christ that he didn't run in vain. We get to live gratefully today, so we shine for Jesus. Let's pray. God, we just ask, Lord, that you would give us these opportunities. We ask, Lord, that you would be with us as we do this. And God, we just thank you for everything that you've done in our lives. We're so grateful for who you are. We pray this in your name.